The garage was so empty I could hear my own breathing echoing off the concrete walls. My workbench was gone. My drill press was gone. The toolbox I'd spent 40 years filling was nowhere to be found. I stood there in my own garage like a stranger, wondering if I was losing my mind. My name is Harold Richardson. I'm 68 years old, a retired mechanical engineer who worked for Boeing for 35 years. I built aircraft engines, saved every penny I could, and earned a decent pension that sends $9,200 into my bank account every month. That's enough for my mortgage, groceries, utilities, and even some left over for the grandkids. But that morning, standing in my empty garage, I knew something was very wrong. When my daughter Lisa knocked on the kitchen door an hour later, I was sitting at the table staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold. She took one look at my face and asked, "Dad, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." I pointed toward the garage. "Go take a look." Lisa walked through the connecting door and came back shaking her head. "Dad, where's all your equipment? Where are your tools?" "That's what I'd like to know," I said quietly. She sat down across from me. Lisa works as a forensic accountant for a firm in Seattle, so she's got a sharp eye for things that don't add up. "When did you last use the workshop?" 2 weeks ago. I was fixing Mrs. Peterson's lawnmower. I rubbed my forehead. Vince stopped by that day, said he needed to borrow a few things for his construction project. Lisa's expression changed. Vince is my son, her older brother. He's 42 and runs a small construction company that's been struggling for the past couple years. "Dad, what exactly did he say he was borrowing? Just some tools. Said he'd bring them back in a few days." I felt foolish saying it, but that was 2 weeks ago. Lisa pulled out her phone. "I'm calling him." "No, don't." I reached for her hand. "I'm sure there's an explanation." She looked at me the way she used to when she was 16, and I was being too trusting about something. "Dad, a few tools don't empty an entire workshop. That equipment was worth thousands of dollars." She was right. My Craftsman toolbox alone cost me $800. The drill press was $1,200. The table saw was $950. I started adding it up in my head and felt sick. Lisa dialed Vince anyway. I could hear his voice through the speaker when he answered, cheerful and casual. "Hey, Lisa." "What's up?" "Vince, Dad's workshop is completely empty. Where are his tools?" There was a pause, then Vince said, "Oh, that. I moved everything to my shop for safekeeping." Dad mentioned he was worried about break-ins in the neighborhood. I stared at Lisa. I'd never said anything about break-ins. "When are you bringing them back?" Lisa asked. "Soon. I'm just reorganizing my workspace. You know how Dad likes everything neat and organized." After Lisa hung up, we sat in silence for a minute. Finally, she said, "Dad, that didn't sound right to me. Maybe he's just busy." I said, but even I didn't believe it. "When's the last time you looked at your bank statements?" That question hit me like a punch to the gut. Vince helps me with that stuff now. Ever since your mother died, he said it was easier if he handled the online banking. You know, I'm not good with computers. Lisa's face went pale. "Dad, can you get into your account? I tried to log in to my bank's website, but the password didn't work." Vince changed it for security, I explained. He said there were too many hackers these days. Lisa stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Dad, we're going to the bank right now." The drive to First National took 15 minutes, but it felt like an hour. Lisa kept asking questions about when Vince started helping with my finances. It was after Dorothy's funeral, I told her. I was grieving, overwhelmed with paperwork, and Vince offered to take care of the banking details. He said it was the least he could do. I remembered those first few weeks after Dorothy died. The house felt so quiet without her humming in the kitchen or calling out reminders about appointments. Vince would stop by every couple days, bringing groceries, sorting through mail, offering to handle things I couldn't focus on. It felt like kindness then. He said online banking was more secure. I told Lisa as we drove, said thieves were targeting elderly people who used paper statements. Made sense to me. "Dad, when did you last actually see a bank statement?" I thought about it. Maybe 6 months ago? Vince said they were all electronic now, stored safely in the cloud. Lisa's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. At the bank, we sat in a small office with Mr. Stanley Foster, the branch manager. He was a professional-looking man in his 50s who treated me with the kind of patient respect I appreciated. "Mr. Richardson," he said after pulling up my account, "I need to ask you something. Are you aware of the large transfers that have been made from your account over the past 18 months? My heart started pounding. "What transfers, Mr. Foster turned his computer screen toward me. "There have been regular transfers to Richardson Construction LLC. The total amount is $147,000. The number hit me like ice water. Lisa grabbed my arm. "Dad, did you authorize those transfers?" I stared at the screen. $147,000. That was more than a year of my pension payments. "No," I whispered. "I never authorized anything like that." Mr. Foster clicked through more screens. The transfers were authorized using your online banking credentials. The account shows your current balance is $3,200. $3,200. Out of 18 months of $9,200 payments, that's what I had left to live on. Lisa's voice was steady but cold. Under what authority were these transfers made? There's a power of attorney document on file, Mr. Foster said. It grants financial management authority to Vincent Richardson. I remembered signing papers with Vince and his wife Linda a year ago. They'd spread them out on my kitchen table after Sunday dinner. Said it was just in case something happened to me so someone could pay my bills. It's like insurance, Dad, Vince had said. You'd do the same for us. Linda had pointed to little yellow sticky notes showing me where to sign. Just standard family protection, she'd assured me. I trusted them. Vince was my son. Linda had been part of our family for 15 years. Lisa leaned forward. Were there any red flags raised about such large, regular transfers? Mr. Foster shifted uncomfortably. The transactions were properly authorized according to our records. However, we can initiate a review if Mr. Richardson requests it. I looked at Lisa, then back at Mr. Foster. My hands were shaking, but my voice was clear. I want the review. As we filled out the paperwork, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Stop digging, or you'll lose more than money. Lisa saw the color drain from my face. She took my phone and read the message. Dad, this is intimidation. We're documenting this with the bank. Mr. Foster nodded grimly. We'll add this to the investigation report. This appears to be witness intimidation, which is a serious matter. The drive home was quiet. Lisa gripped the steering wheel, her jaw set in determination. I stared out the passenger window, watching familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. How long had this been happening while I went about my daily routine, completely unaware? Dad, Lisa said as we pulled into my driveway, I need you to think carefully. Besides the power of attorney, did you sign anything else? Any business documents, investment papers, loan applications? I don't think so. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. There were several papers that day. Vince said it was all part of the same protection package. We'd barely walked into my kitchen when Vince's truck pulled up in the driveway. He came through the back door without knocking the way he had since he was a kid. But now it felt different. Invasive. Dad, what were you doing at the bank today? Lisa stepped forward. We were finding out where $147,000 of Dad's money went. Vince's face flushed red. That money was invested in the business. Dad knew about it. No, I didn't, I said quietly. You signed the papers, Vince insisted. You said you wanted to help the family business grow. I signed papers so you could pay my bills if I got sick, I replied. Not so you could take everything I had. Linda appeared in the doorway behind Vince. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her purse strap. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked like fear. Harold, you don't understand the bigger picture. The construction industry is cyclical. This was a temporary cash flow issue. Lisa crossed her arms. Temporary? It's been 18 months. We were about to close a major city contract, Vince said desperately. The money would have been repaid with interest. We still might get it. What contract? Lisa demanded. Vince hesitated. Linda answered quietly. It fell through last month. The room went silent. Lisa asked the question I was afraid to hear the answer to. So what's the current status of Dad's money? Vince looked down at his boots. Most of it went to keeping the company afloat. Payroll, suppliers, equipment payments. You know how it is, Dad? You ran project budgets at Boeing. Sometimes you have to invest to stay competitive. Most of it. Lisa's voice was sharp. There's debt, Linda whispered. About $95,000 in business loans. The company is struggling. I felt dizzy. My life savings had been fed into a failing business, and now there was debt on top of it. All those years of careful saving, living below my means, planning for Dorothy and me to have a secure retirement. Gone. Lisa pulled out her phone. I'm calling our attorney. Wait, Vince said quickly. If you bring in lawyers, they'll freeze everything. The company will collapse completely. People will lose their jobs. Good people, Dad. Guys with families who depend on those paychecks. I looked at my son, really looked at him. His face was desperate, his hands shaking slightly. There were dark circles under his eyes I hadn't noticed before. Vince, why didn't you just tell me the truth? If you needed help, you could have asked. His voice broke. Because I didn't want you to see me fail, Dad. After Mom died, you were so proud when I told you the business was growing. You'd introduce me to your friends as my son, the successful contractor. I couldn't admit it was falling apart. That's when I understood something painful. This hadn't started as theft. It had started as pride. Vince was ashamed of failing, so he borrowed from my trust instead of asking for help honestly. When the first big contract got canceled, Vince continued, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought I could make it up before you noticed. 1 month became 2, then 6. Each month I told myself the next job would fix everything. But pride had grown into deception, and deception had grown into desperation. Dad, Vince continued, his voice pleading, there's still a chance to fix this. Roger Martinez, our financial advisor, says if we can restructure the debt and show stable cash flow, we can negotiate with the creditors. Lisa shook her head. Who is Roger Martinez? Linda answered reluctantly. He's been helping us manage the business finances for the past year. I didn't like the sound of that. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Is he the one who suggested using my pension money? Vince nodded slowly. He said it was a common strategy. Family asset consolidation to strengthen credit profiles. Said lots of families do it. Lisa's eyes flashed with anger. That's not asset consolidation. That's elder financial abuse. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud, elder financial abuse. I'd heard that term on the evening news, but I never thought it would apply to me. Within an hour, Roger Martinez arrived at my house. He was a tall man in an expensive suit, probably around 45, with silver hair and the kind of smooth confidence that made me instantly wary. He shook my hand with a firm grip and called me Mr. Richardson with practiced politeness, but his eyes were calculating. There seems to be some confusion about the financial arrangements, he said, settling into my living room like he belonged there. He opened a leather briefcase and pulled out several folders. Let me explain the strategy we've been implementing. Lisa didn't offer him coffee. She stood with her arms crossed, every inch the forensic accountant. Explain why a 68-year-old retiree's pension was used to prop up a failing construction company without his clear understanding. Roger's smile tightened slightly. Mr. Richardson signed all the appropriate documentation. The power of attorney was properly executed. The transfers were legitimate under family business investment protocols. I didn't understand what I was signing. I said firmly. Roger looked at me carefully, like he was measuring my words. Understanding is subjective, sir. The documentation is clear and legally binding. Lisa stepped closer. No, legal consent requires informed understanding. If material risks were hidden from my father, that's misrepresentation and potentially fraud. Roger's smooth demeanor began to crack. Mrs. Richardson, Lisa Richardson, CPA and forensic accountant with 12 years of experience in financial fraud investigation. His expression changed when he heard her credentials. The practiced smile faded. I see. Well, the situation is complex. Vincent's business has significant potential. The temporary cash flow challenges are not unusual in the construction sector. Temporary. Lisa pulled out some papers she'd printed at the bank. This has been going on for 18 months. The company has liens filed against it for unpaid suppliers. There are no major contracts pending. What exactly is your exit strategy here? Roger glanced at Vince, then back at Lisa. I noticed Vince looked uncomfortable when Roger's attention shifted to him. There are negotiations in progress, but if legal challenges are filed, creditors will accelerate their collection efforts. The entire structure could collapse. I felt a chill run down my spine. What does that mean for me? Roger hesitated for the first time since he'd arrived. He looked at Vince again, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Your financial security is our primary concern, Mr. Richardson. That's not what I asked, I said. What happens to me if this whole thing falls apart? Your home was used as additional collateral for some of the business loans, Roger said quietly. The world seemed to tilt my house. Vince jumped in quickly. It was just a formality, Dad. To get better interest rates. Roger said it was standard practice for family-backed businesses. Lisa's voice was ice cold. You put Dad's house at risk? The loans are performing, Roger said. But he sounded less confident now. As long as the business maintains some level of operation, the collateral isn't threatened. And if the business fails, Lisa pressed. Roger didn't answer immediately. That silence told me everything I needed to know. My home, the house where Dorothy and I had raised our children, where I'd built that workshop in the garage, where all my memories lived, was on the line. Lisa picked up her phone. We're filing a complaint with the State Attorney General's Office for Elder Financial Abuse. And we're requesting an immediate freeze on all transactions involving Dad's assets. Wait, Roger said quickly, his composure finally cracking. That would be inadvisable. The situation is delicate. If you escalate this legally, it could trigger consequences that hurt everyone involved. I stood up slowly. For months, I'd felt confused and helpless. But sitting in my own living room, listening to this man threaten my family, I remembered who I was. I'd spent 35 years solving complex engineering problems at Boeing. I'd managed teams, budgets, and deadlines. I'd designed components for aircraft that carried hundreds of thousands of people safely through the sky. I wasn't some helpless old man, Mr. Martinez, I said calmly. You advised my son to use my pension and put my home at risk without making sure I understood what was happening. Is that correct? Roger's jaw tightened. All documentation was properly executed according to legal standards. That's not what I asked. He didn't answer. I continued. Did you tell Vince that if his business failed, I could lose my house again? No answer. But his silence was answer enough. Did you explain to him that taking an elderly man's pension without clear informed consent might be considered financial abuse? Roger's face was getting red. Mr. Richardson, you're oversimplifying a complex business situation. No, I said quietly. I'm asking simple questions that should have simple answers, and you're not giving them. Lisa stepped beside me. The conversation ends here. Tomorrow we're meeting with an independent attorney who specializes in elder financial abuse cases. Any further communication goes through legal counsel. Roger's mask finally slipped completely. If you pursue legal action, he said sharply, Vincent will face personal liability for fraudulent asset transfers. The business will be forced into immediate bankruptcy. The house will be reviewed by creditors within 48 hours. Vince looked at Roger in shock. You said everything was legal. It is legal, Roger replied curtly, but legal and risk-free are different things. I told you there were potential complications if the family didn't cooperate. That's when I realized something important. Roger had protected himself, not my son. He'd given Vince just enough legal cover to keep himself clear while making sure all the risk fell on our family. Vince had trusted him the same way I'd trusted Vince. We'd both been played by someone who understood the law well enough to stay just inside the boundaries while destroying people's lives. Get out of my house, I said quietly. Roger gathered his papers with sharp, angry movements. You're making a serious mistake, Mr. Richardson. The financial consequences of this decision will be severe. The only mistake I made, I replied, was trusting my son to be honest with me. Everything else is just business, and business can be fixed. After Roger left, Vince sat heavily in Dorothy's old chair. He looked smaller, somehow defeated. Dad, Vince said quietly, I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far. Lisa replied before I could answer. And now we have to deal with the consequences. I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at my driveway where Roger's expensive car had been parked. Vince, I need to ask you something and I want an honest answer. Did you really believe what Roger told you, or did you know it was wrong and do it anyway? He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. At first I believed him, but after the third month, when the money kept going out and no contracts were coming in, I knew it was wrong, but I was in too deep to stop. That honesty, painful as it was, felt like the first real conversation we'd had in 2 years. The next morning, Lisa and I met with Patricia Williams, an attorney who specialized in financial elder abuse cases. Her office was downtown in a building that smelled like coffee and old books. She was probably in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and the kind of direct manner that reminded me of Dorothy. She reviewed all the documents, the bank statements, the power of attorney papers, and the threatening text messages. For an hour, she asked careful questions and took notes in neat handwriting. Mr. Richardson, she said, finally, you have a strong case. The power of attorney was exceeded, the risks weren't properly disclosed, and using your home as collateral without clear informed consent is serious misconduct. Can I lose my house? I asked directly. Not if we act quickly. The lenders who accepted your home as collateral used questionable advisory practices. When faced with the possibility of being connected to elder abuse, they'll likely renegotiate rather than face regulatory scrutiny. Over the next 3 weeks, things moved faster than I expected. The bank investigation confirmed the unauthorized use of my pension funds. Roger Martinez became the subject of a state regulatory review for financial misconduct. 2 other families came forward with similar complaints against him. The creditors, faced with the possibility of being connected to elder abuse, agreed to remove my house from the collateral agreements. They'd rather take a loss on the business loans than face the legal complications. Vince had to declare business bankruptcy. Richardson Construction LLC was dissolved. The equipment was sold, the remaining contracts were transferred to other companies, and Vince had to lay off his 3 employees. He'd have to start over from scratch, but he'd also have to face something he'd avoided for 2 years: honest failure. The day he signed the bankruptcy papers, he came to my house alone. We sat at the kitchen table where Dorothy used to serve Sunday dinner, where we'd had so many family conversations over the years. Dad, he said quietly, I'm sorry. I studied his face. He looked different, older maybe, but also more genuine than he'd seemed in months. Sorry for what? For using your money without really explaining it. For risking your house. For letting my pride matter more than your security. For lying to you for 18 months. That was the first completely honest thing he'd said since this whole mess began. I will pay you back, he continued, even if it takes 10 years. I'll work construction for other people. I'll drive a truck. I'll do whatever it takes. But this time I won't hide from the truth. I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up the coffee pot. Vince, do you want some coffee? He looked confused by the question. Sure, Dad. I poured 2 cups and sat back down. You know what I learned from this whole experience? He shook his head. I learned that I'm tougher than I thought I was. For months, I felt confused and helpless, but when push came to shove, I still had my wits about me. I could still fight for what was mine. I took a sip of coffee. I also learned that trust isn't the same thing as blind faith. Real trust means you trust someone enough to verify things, to ask questions, to stay involved in your own life. Dad, I know I don't deserve. Let me finish. I said gently, I don't need revenge, Vince. I need honesty. And I need you to remember something clearly. This house isn't just property. It's my security, my memories, my life. No business dream is worth risking that without my full understanding. He nodded, tears in his eyes. 6 weeks later, the investigation concluded. Through asset recovery and settlement negotiations, I recovered $89,000 of my pension money. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to secure my retirement. More importantly, it was enough to know that the system worked, that truth still mattered. The power of attorney was revoked. My accounts were placed under independent oversight with my direct access restored. I could see every transaction, every balance, every statement. $9,200 began arriving again each month, and this time I watched every penny. Lisa came over for dinner that Sunday. We sat in the kitchen with the lights on, the heat turned up, and groceries in the refrigerator. The garage had some basic tools again, not everything I'd lost, but enough to fix Mrs. Peterson's lawnmower. Dad, Lisa said, cutting into her roast beef, what do you think the real lesson was in all this? I thought about it while I chewed. The real lesson is that silence can look like peace, but sometimes silence is the most dangerous thing in the room. When something feels wrong, it probably is. And trust isn't weakness, I said, but blind trust can become dangerous. Real trust means you care enough about someone to stay involved, to ask questions, to verify things. If someone gets angry when you want to understand what you're signing, that's not trust they're asking for. That's submission. 6 months later, I still check my bank balance every week. Not because I don't trust the system now, but because I learned that trust without verification isn't wisdom. It's just hope, and hope alone doesn't protect your life savings. Vince got a job with a roofing company. He's working his way up, learning the business from the ground up again. We have dinner once a month, and he tells me about his work, his struggles, his small victories. The conversations are different now. More honest, more real. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt like you were losing control of your own life, remember this. Confusion isn't the same as helplessness. When someone you trust asks you to stop asking questions, that's exactly when you should ask more. Because sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is admit he trusted the wrong person and then fight to get his life back. The empty garage taught me that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what you're truly made of, and that a man's real strength isn't measured by what he accumulates, but by what he's willing to fight for when it's taken away. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I learned the most important lesson of my life at 68. The difference between trusting someone and surrendering your power to them, and that wisdom isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about having the courage to fix them when you finally see the truth.